Well, I'm going to start over. I think we're live now, so I'd like once again to welcome everybody to the second day of session, February 13th, 2024. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Roll call for the second day of session, February 13th, 2024. Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos?
Excused.
Banks?
Here.
Bear?
Here.
Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron?
Here.
Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Prego? Davis?
Here.
Eklund? Haroldson?
Here.
Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke?
Present.
Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec?
Here.
Northrop? Oakley? Obermueller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft?
Here.
Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
Here.
61 present, 1 excused.
So the prayer of the day is once again by Mary Cockett from Christ Episcopal Church in Cody, Wyoming. Please rise.
A quick context for the prayer today. In 1790, our founding president, George Washington, wrote a letter to a friend who was a historian in England. And he wrote, in part, the establishment of our new government seemed to be the last great experiment for promoting human happiness by creating a reasonable compact in civil society. I thank you for the invitation, Speaker Summers, and I thank all of you for your commitment to engage in this last great experiment and to bring it creatively forward to meet the needs of a new day. And my first prayer today is supposedly written by that same president, although scholars think that the prayer really came from sometime in the late 19th century. Let us pray. Almighty God, who hast given us this good land for our heritage, we humbly beseech thee that we may always prove ourselves a people mindful of thy favor and glad to do thy will. Bless our land with honorable industry, sound learning, and pure manners. Save us from violence, discord, and confusion, from pride and arrogance, and from every evil way. Defend our liberties and fashion into one united people the multitudes brought hither out of many kindreds and tongues. Endue with the spirit of wisdom those to whom in thy name we entrust the authority of government, that there may be justice and peace at home. And through obedience to thy law, we may show forth thy praise among the nations of the earth. In the time of prosperity, fill our hearts with thankfulness. And in the day of trouble, suffer not our trust in thee to fail. all of which we ask through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. And I have a second offering today, a briefer that is from my ideas from hearing the state of the state yesterday morning, that you all have a lot of work to do in a really short time. So I'm going to take up some of that time. Let us pray. Breathing in the spirit of the source of all peace. And breathing out any discord or rank growth of wickedness. Lord, root us in your peace, a peace which passes all understanding, which is available to us with every breath we take. Help us let go what needs not to be said. Help us speak the truth in love. And in all of our hurriedness and busyness, we ask that you clothe us with your strength and your gentleness and lead us to your will for this great state. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Cockett, for those words. I think they were well positioned. And now we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Play ball! Play ball! The House will please come to order. Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 12th, 2024 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Chestick and Ward.
So next on the agenda, we're going to have, I think, a privilege or two. So Representative Larson, I believe, had a privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor.
Please go ahead.
Folks, up in the gallery behind me, we're very fortunate today to have a dear friend and a great example for the state of Wyoming as far as public service. Joanna Kell is the CEO of Wyoming PBS. She's here with us. We appreciate what their staff done yesterday in making sure that the rest of the state could see the State of the State address and all of the filming that they do of our committee meetings through the course of the year. She's works tirelessly, and she wanted to ask me to remind you that tomorrow PBS is hosting a grab and go breakfast down in the corridor, and invite everybody to come. Ms. Kell, thank you.
Welcome to the House, and thank you for what you folks do. Does anybody else have any privileges of anybody up there? Okay, so we're going to just move. We're going to move into the rule discussion. So remember, if you go into the part of the on the website, if you go to where the bills are, legislation, and you go to the bottom of that, you'll see a session. It's like session something, schedule something. It's the very bottom. Yeah, session information. It's the very bottom tab on about that third one from the left. And then if you click on that, you'll get to those rules. And so there's two of them. One of them was brought by Representative Bear. And so the other one is one I just drafted on reconsideration. If somebody wants to move it, they can. If they don't, it doesn't matter to me. I just wanted to give folks the option to put into rule what we did last session. So Representative Bear, I think we'll just start out with you, and it'll take a motion as well, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Rule 002 amendment and ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, this is a good old friend of ours. This is something that I've brought each year, and predecessors had brought it in previous years. And I think this year it's more poignant than ever. And I hope that you'll just give it a moment to consider. We have in this year, a budget year that is, we have an opportunity, folks, to really get control of our spending and do that on behalf of our constituents. This particular budget that started out with the governor's recommendation is considerably higher than what we've spent in the past. This is the largest budget the state of Wyoming has ever seen. It is 30% or more above the budget that the governor.
Representative
sorry.
Bear, let's just stick with the rule, which is it's a lot simpler than discussing our current budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This rule simply states that if you are going to increase the budget from what the JAC has supplied to us, that you will bring an offset for that increase, so that we will go with exactly what the JAC, who's had each of the departments come before them, who's looked at the governor's recommendation and heard his letters, seen his letters, heard his input, his testimony, all those inputs. We have to give them deference for having made good decisions on behalf of this body. So what I would suggest is that the bottom line number in the budget that has come out of JAC is one that we should hold as a line that we hold on to, that we maintain. To do that, this rule determines that we would find an offset for any addition to the budget based on an amendment that you would bring. And it also applies to the CapCon bill. Now, when we brought this in the past, there was criticism and concern. It was illegitimate, but it was concerned that this would apply to your personal bills. And so in this particular rule change, that amendment that I'm bringing, we've given some clarification that this does not apply to anything other than the budget bill amendments and the CapCon bill amendments. So if you've brought a bill in this particular session where it's going to have some spending, that is something that the JAC will have to deal with when that appropriation goes before them, but it will not affect your requirement. You would not be required to go find an offset. So with that, I ask for your favorable consideration in this amendment.
So it's funny, we're in the middle of a rule debate and I'm going to evoke a rule that I don't know whether that's right or not, but just remember in debate, I think it would be, and I look to Representative Zwanitzer or others, I believe you can only 2 debates, per person. So it'll be, other than committee of the whole, we're pretty much stuck on you can only go to the mic twice. So just wanted to repeat that to everybody so everybody realized that. So Representative Stipp, for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, members, I would urge a no vote on this rule change. In the budget bill you have in front of you right now, there is $72 million of revenue that is expected to be received by the state over this biennium that is neither spent nor saved.
So
that
once
is
again,
money.
Representative Stipp, I don't need numbers from the budget. We're debating a rule particularly, so try not to invoke, just like the last speaker, try not to invoke the current budget.
And Mr. Speaker, respectfully, I do believe it's relevant because this rule change would essentially reduce the power of this body to make reasonable decisions, and it would amount to a shift of power from this whole body to the Appropriations Committee. So that's the effect of what this rule would do. And so I think that's a bad idea. If you want to give more power to the Appropriations Committee, because what'll happen is if this rule goes into effect, the next time you see a budget, there won't be $72 million of revenue that's expected to be received, but neither spent nor allocated. It'll all be spent. So this rule diminishes the power of the full body. As a result of that, I urge a no vote.
Representative Larson, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too would encourage no vote. I think this body has the ability to make the decisions up or down, but I do have a couple of clarifying questions. The bringer of the proposed rule has indicated the importance of maintaining bottom line on what the JAC is presenting in their budget and the need to find offsetting places in the budget. So then that would mean that if we make a reduction in spending, that we would need to find someplace else to increase spending. Just want to, I think that's what I'm hearing. And then if he could just clarify what capital construction bill he was referring to.
Representative Pendergraft, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in favor of this rule change. Every family has a budget, and that budget is based on how much money they have, and they pay taxes out of that to support us. Every business that pays taxes through their customers has an amount of money that they're able to spend. That's the baseline, and they have to work from that. And that forces us to make some choices. If I really, really want this, then I'm going to have to give something up. I've had to do that quite a bit over the last few years as my insurance and other rates rise. So I think this is a very good procedure. Let's just set a baseline and say, this is how much money we have, and let's figure out how to best spend it. Thank you.
Representative Henderson, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition, not that I'm against the concept, because I think we should be looking for ways to be fiscally smart. But I just suggest that the first step in any solution is communication. We need to have these good conversations, but you have to think about going into this complex process with the best of intentions and unintentionally jeopardize the welfare and well-being of residents, as in the recent speech, reference was made to a need for help with an ambulance, things like that. There's a whole process that we have to consider. And I just would ask for clarification on what would you do if you're rigid about this? Not intending to do damage, but perhaps the outcome is not all positive. It's not just about numbers, right? It's about people who are trying to have a good life. We have a lot of rural areas in our state that don't have enough wallets and economic base to do the right thing. So we have to listen to them, I believe. And I think we need to keep talking, and I support the bringer in having that conversation. Thank you.
Representative Alaman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We do not have an income problem. We have a spending problem. This is one way that we can try and cap that. We have many tax bills that's going to be coming before us. This is just as important as the tax bills, because if we don't spend it, we do not have to tax our people for it. So I support this bill big time. Thank you.
Representative Alaman, this is a rule, but same principle. Representative Chairman Eklund for your first time.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and body. So these are pretty good arguments. If we have money available or the ability to spend money, I think oftentimes we will. And the rule that's proposed would probably limit spending. But what it will take away from us is the flexibility. I've watched this floor perform for years, and in the middle of session, people will come up with reasons why we might need to increase the budget a little bit. Hopefully not a lot. I don't think we generally do. There are little increases here and there, but to remove that ability of all of us to serve our constituents is a flexibility I don't want to lose. So I'm going to vote no on it. And with respect from the bringer and the people who believes it'll, I agree with you. It would probably limit our spending, but we're here to serve our constituents as well.
Representative Jennings for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm in favor of this rule change, not just because of that, but I've heard that it'll stifle the debate. Actually, I think it'll do the opposite. It'll cause us to think about what we're spending and what are we really willing to trade out one thing for another. Our national spending is, our national legislature has got a lot of problems, but this is one of the few things that actually would be good for us to have offsets. It would cause us to think about that. What do our constituents in an offset, what do they really want? There's lots of things that sound good and that has their own set of merits, but if we have to really think about it, I see this as actually causing us to think more, debate more, and really think about the bottom line of what's important to our constituents rather than just continuing. We have this other problem where we follow the national lead of just wanting to spend. And so this might be an interesting experiment in this rule change that we would actually get to look at and debate. What do our constituents truly want from us? And if the byproduct of that is that we save some money, so much the better.
Representative Davis for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is just my observation, going through this budget process, we have monies that really don't exist. We call them expected revenues, right? So if we're expecting these revenues, but they really haven't materialized, and all we're doing is authorizing the ability to spend something that really we don't know. It's just expected. So I'm a little bit torn on what we're doing here. We're not sure on one hand and we're not sure on the other hand. And the authority is, if we receive that, we can use them. If not, they're not available. So that's my take on this.
Chairman Washut for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, when I first came in this body, I remember my very first budget session, thinking how little influence most of us have over the budget. That the joint appropriators are gladiators on committee two. They have tremendous influence over this budget. And most of us have very little input on that. So if you really think that the Appropriations Committee produces a perfect budget, okay, then you should support this amendment, this rule change. But if you think that from time to time, they may make judgments that either things change from the time the budget was prepared a few weeks ago till today, or that they made kind of an arbitrary judgment about how much money a particular agency might need. But when you talk to your people back home, you realize, hey, there is a need. And if you want the ability to try to affect the outcomes of some of those things, you don't want to be constrained by having to go and find an offset so that you rob Peter to pay Paul, especially if there is unencumbered anticipated revenues, where the Appropriations Committee says, we have some amount of money. We recognize that constituents of yours may be asking you to fulfill some need back home. And there's some money available for us to try and address those needs to solve problems. We should be frugal. We should be careful how we spend the taxpayers' money. But we also need to fulfill our responsibilities to serve the people, to meet their needs. And I think this artificially creates a limitation that will have workarounds in the future. There will be pots of money tucked away in little corners that we may not even be aware of. And then if you have the right contacts and you want to make an offset, somebody will point you in the right direction of where you can find an offset. I don't think we solve the problem this way, folks. I really don't. I think we really inhibit the authority and the power of each of us to serve our constituents, to meet the needs of the people that we represent. I certainly appreciate the idea behind this rule change. It makes sense, but it really is going to create limitations on us and give a disproportionate power shift to Committee 2.
Representative Ottman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the privileges of being in this body is to be part of all this debate. And it's wonderful as we see problems coming up during the year, problems coming up in our committees, problems coming up in society, we're able to come here and speak about these things. One of the things that this rule change has brought to my mind is that there is a lot of consensus around the state that there needs to be more transparency and more auditability, and that we haven't been able to do that. We're a part-time legislature. So if this would be the avenue to be able to actually push forward that working, I'd be all for it. Thank you.
Representative Yin for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, first for a second.
Chairman Harshman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question. And this is an old friend. It comes and goes, but I appreciate the bringer bringing this so we can all talk about it. And of course, the budget, when the 10 billion thing is quoted, that includes, of course, federal funds, pass-through funds, game and fish, highway, and gaming funds, all those things that really aren't appropriated. But so when you look at the $3 billion budget, my first question is really about savings. I remember when I was a freshman and we were right in the middle of the Jonah gas boom, and I brought an amendment to this floor. I think I stood at this mic, and for $100 million deposit in the permanent mineral trust fund, bam, right out of the general fund. And we just come through the 90s. Everybody's so broke in this state. So what do you got to offset in that budget to save $100 million? Because that's an appropriation. Because like last year, you look at the budget, 460 some million was savings, but that was part of the budget. those are appropriations. They look like spending when you look at the total number of the budget. Okay, so my first question is about savings. And then I think the other issue is, and I always used to say, and I served on appropriations 10 years, chaired it for 4 years, but I used to always say, we can probably do anything we want, but we can't do everything. And so that's where these decisions come down. And it used to be in the old days, the chairman of appropriations, the only one had the summary sheet. He's the only guy who had all the information. All that information now is shared with us. It's online. Everything is out there. And it takes work to kind of dig into that thing. But I think that, you know, and then I guess just, Mr. Speaker and members, just overall philosophical. We have this, you know, Wyoming, we just passed this amazing threshold where we now have the most investment income per person, per capita, past Alaska. First time ever. It's really incredible. So you got minerals that pay half our taxes every year, 50%. And then we go ahead and spend 85% of that every year. We save 15% of it in a permanent fund, but we spend most of it on today's people. And that's a big debate. Do we spend today's money on today's people? Is government a pay-as-you-go thing, or should government be a bank and hold on to money? I think it's a pay-as-you-go thing, but Wyoming, we've been super conservative. Go back to Governor Hathaway and the members in this chamber that founded the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. Save a little bit. First of all, pay your bills.
Chairman. let's
Yeah,
stick
yeah.
with the
Thank you,
rule.
Mr. Speaker. I apologize. But the first thing we do in this budget, is pay our bills. That's what conservative people do. And then if you got a little bit left over at the end of the month, you put it in the bank and save it for a rainy day. And we've done such a great job of that. And so my first question is, all of us savers who work so hard to build the Permanent Minerals Trust Fund and all these funds over the years, and this work continues, incredible. How's this going to affect savings? I don't know. I guess I got to cut it out of the Department of Health to save 100 million now. Doesn't make any sense. It's not the way it works. If we want to debate something big time, let's debate it. Let's go back to the last quarter century. We have fewer state employees than we did 15 years ago. But what's the biggest increase in state employees in the last quarter century? What is it? I mean, yeah, we built a prison in Torrington.
Come on.
We hired 200 people. So that's the biggest increase. And so as we watch this budget and work it, I think an amendment like this puts real harm to the process. And we've seen this amendment before, and your predecessors have voted it down for good reason. And I appreciate you bringing it because we got to have these discussions, but it just won't work. You don't rob Peter to pay Paul. You decide what Paul needs, and if Peter needs something different, you debate those issues. And the conservative nature of this body will keep the overall level down, and we'll pay our bills. And if we have a little left over, we'll save it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Slagle for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question I would ask the body here is, we have approximately $45,000 for each person in Wyoming in savings right now. The question is, can we as the legislative body figure out how to spend the money for our people better than they can? I would challenge us to consider doing something like Alaska does and give payment back to each of our individuals in our state. Thank
So,
you.
Representative Slagle, you kind of went down the same path, only a different angle than the last speaker. So we're going to stick to this budget amendment, or I'm going to start gaveling people down. All right. Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time prior to the sponsor? Representative Pendergraph for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to respond to a couple of the comments that were made. One of them from a legislator whom I particularly respect, but I disagreed with the comments. He said, we don't want to be constrained. And I would contend that actually we do want to be constrained. This isn't our money, it's the people's money. We need to feel that constraint. They certainly do. The next one is we need to meet their needs. When were we appointed the nanny of all the people of Wyoming? I think we need to take a very serious look at everything that we do and whether or not it falls within the accurate and necessary purview of governance. And keeping the word conservative was used, and to me, the word conservative means to be constrained, to be confined. Government isn't there to meet our every need. And then one last thing that was brought up was the amount of savings that this state has.
Remember, we're on this budget amendment. So if you're going to talk about
Yes.
savings, pertain it to this budget amendment.
This does. Don't feel that it's the right of the state to hoard billions and billions of dollars. And we justify that by saying, now we keep you from having to pay taxes. The problem is that the people don't realize.
Representative,
that this is very.
You've gone beyond that. You need to talk about this budget amendment.
This rule change, the amendment to the rule, forces us to live within our means, helps us to have these very intricate discussions about what we actually can afford, because at some point, if the people had to actually bear the brunt of all that we are spending, I think there would be a serious rebellion.
Thank you. Anybody else for their second time before the sponsor? Not Representative Barefoot for your second time. Representative Henderson for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to emphasize again the importance of having communication and a good conversation, particularly from the folks that we represent. We're all duly elected, as you know, and this rule, I think, would restrict a lot of opportunity from each one of us to participate in the amendment process. You could bring an amendment, but you'd be limited to the restrictions imposed in this rule. I think that could be damaging, particularly, again, I would say this, for those who don't have the economic wherewithal that they need. We don't have a crystal ball, not a single one of us. We don't know what's going to happen this afternoon. But we do know that we have a lot of good people here voted in to represent thousands of people across our good state. And I think it makes sense to be very, very concerned and focused on making sure we understand what our communities are telling us and understanding where in the process we can do our part to represent their best interests and to help them. I don't know why you would want to get in the way of helping your community. So I would urge caution. Gently push back and urge caution. There's a lot of unknown. This budget has a lot of things. The rule would restrict us severely. It's like going into a fight with your hand tied behind your back. Why would you do that? Thank you.
Anybody else for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Yin for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So members, we are the branch that handles the purse strings. So I think the good representative from Sheridan County said it well. This is the people's money. And the people elected each of us duly to deal with that money responsibly. What we do is delegate some of that power to the Appropriations Committee to give us a recommendation. So they give us a recommendation in the form of the bill, but that doesn't mean that they make the final decision on how much money gets spent. We are the ones in charge of the purse strings, every single one of us. What this rule does is take that power away from us and gives it to the Appropriations Committee. I don't know why anyone would want to give that power away because, again, the people elected us. We have that responsibility. If you think that responsibility is to spend less and that's what you need to take to your voters, do that. But don't give the power away from yourself to another committee member. This is the legislature's responsibility, and you should keep it there and vote down this rule. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Jennings for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the previous couple of speakers, I actually have to agree with. I think that from the standpoint that this will cause people to think and have their hand tied behind their back, well, maybe that's the spending hand, I don't know. We'll see. I'm usually on the yes side for spending, but in this case, I think I would be for maybe not. And I think this rule change causes more debate. It causes you to evaluate what really is important to those people back home. And you get to look at that and say, you know what? This is important enough that I am willing to look at that. It was brought up that this could hamper the savings. I don't know if it will or not. I think it's fair enough to say to the people back home that this rule change makes us look at how much we would do that and how important it is to us, so that we can stand in front of those people and say, yeah, I did save money and I paid for it here. I did an offset. I looked at this and I thought it's important enough for us to do this. And so I think this rule change, I think it does maybe give us a little bit of tying our hand behind our back a little bit. Maybe while we have time thinking about that hand behind our back, we can actually think about what we should be spending things on. And so I'm not afraid of that debate that this rule change would bring. It's an honest debate. How important is it? And as far as our good committee that takes care of this, I don't see this as hampering them. I think they go through lots and lots of stuff when they bring this forward. And so this rule would cause us to debate their work even further, and maybe things that they hadn't thought about. And so I'm all in for the debate. Vote aye on the rule change.
Anybody else for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Bear for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much, my colleagues, for the vigorous debate. It was very helpful to hear your opinions and your questions, and I hope that I can maintain your attention here because I really want to address each of these concerns. Some of them were made by statements and some by questions. I prefer the questions because some of these statements really are straw men about this particular amendment. So I want to make it real clear to all of you before you make your vote exactly how this amendment would work. First of all, the good appropriators all brought up a concern about them having too much power within that one committee, and other legislators have brought that up, that we don't want to centralize this power in this small group of our body. The good minority floor leader was passionate about that very subject. Well, here's the thing, folks. We still have the ultimate power. We can change their decisions. This does, as the chairman of revenue stated, it does require work. If you pick up that budget that you have, it's a huge document, but we are the controllers of the purse strings. It's important that we know what's in there. Also, the chairman of revenue made a great statement. He said, we have constraints. He said specifically, we can do anything, but not everything. But in the same statement, he said, we can't constrain ourselves to where we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. But folks, that's what that constraint means. We can't do everything. Specifically, it was brought up, and there was a question, what if we have a reduction? What if we want to do a reduction? This amendment is very clear. It's only on increases. So if you want to reduce the budget and you can get that past this body, I applaud you, first of all, but thank you for doing it. But you can, and you don't have to bring an increase. Thank you for that question. So there was questions or concerns about a new pot of money showing up. And what could we do about that if we had a new concern? Folks, what this does, this requires that you bring a bill. And this addresses the other issue about debate. If we're going to change what we're going to spend this year based on JAC coming up with a bottom line number, and now we found a pot of cash, which by the way happens about every year, folks. It's always amazing how we find another pot of cash. But if we have a need that we need to spend that money, we can address it with a bill. And then the debate is specifically about that issue. When we go through the budget, we get 3 shots at it. 1 to hear what it's about, basically a summary. 1 to have our second reading amendments and a chance to debate that, and a third, last final shot at it. That's 3 days and maybe 4 or 5 hours each of those days to work on it. Folks, our debate is so limited on that it's time to take those other things into another bill and another debate. And that's creating transparency. I would applaud that. And that's what this amendment would do. So there are no constraints on this body as far as spending every dime that's available. It does do so within the budget itself, which maybe this is the beginning step of a spending policy, which the state does not have. Our policy, as the good representative from the southwest part of the state said, it's all based on what we think is going to come in the future for revenues. We have no policy other than to spend all of that. That seems to be what we do. Although the good chairman of revenue talked about savings, and it is within the budget considered an appropriation. But if you wanted to put more savings, more money into savings, bring a bill. Bring a bill. I think that's a policy that this body should continually look at. Do we save money? Do we spend it all? Or do we keep it till next year in case we have an emergency? One of the things about our permanent mineral trust fund is the first word in the name. It's permanent. That's good because we can't reach in there and spend that money, and that creates the revenue that the good chairman of revenue talked about. But what it also does is it puts constraints on us. As soon as we put it in there, if we have an emergency or a downturn in our economy, our hands are tied. So let's say some pot of money comes up late in the session and we're unable to access it because the bill cutoff time was passed. By the way, we can override that with a 2/3 vote, just like this amendment. But let's say we couldn't get it done. That money would sit out there available to us until we come into session again. Is that a terrible thing? That we have money available to us at a future date should an emergency arrive? I don't think so. This amendment, it could be the beginning of a spending policy for the state. I would love it if that were the case. But really, it's only about constraining our work within the budget. It will create more debate because those things that can't be done within the constraints of this amendment will have to be done with a personal bill, or it could be even a committee bill. They will have to be done that way. And my goodness, we get a lot of debate on those bills, and there's single subject. It's a beautiful thing that our founders set up for us. Single subject. We will debate that particular issue. And that's only if you don't want to go find an offset. If you want to find an offset, we can work on it within the budget. It'll be a short debate because we have limited time for the budget, but you can still do it. And it does take work. But that's what our constituents sent us here to do, is good work. If we're going to be controlling the purse strings of this state, we should take it seriously enough to work on it. One of the appropriators said, communication is important. And another, one of my colleagues said, we need to go find these pots of money before we can add an expense. And he suggested, I think it was the chairman of Judiciary said, you're going to have to go over to those appropriators and find out where there's a pot of money you can get an offset. This is increasing that communication, folks. This is increasing your level of knowledge about what the appropriators do. And I think those are all positive outcomes from this one rule change. So with that, I really appreciate the debate. I hope I've answered all the questions, and I hope you'll give it an aye vote, folks. This would be a tremendous thing for the state of Wyoming. Thank you.
All right. Chief Clerk, please call the roll. What? Yes, it requires 2/3 because we're not at the beginning of a new term.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos, excused. Banks? Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Clauston. Conrad. Prego. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Heiner. No to I. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrop. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. I. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwaniter Dan. Zwaniter Dave. Speaker Summers.
No.
Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 22 aye, 39 no, 1 excused.
So House Rule 2 has failed to receive 2/3 of the majority vote, and so House Rule 2 has failed. Now, on this next budget amendment, I said, right, once again, I just put it up there, let anybody who wants to move it, if they want to move it. I think Representative Yin wants to move this budget amendment, so I'll turn it over to him to move the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move House Rule 001 and ask for your aye vote tentatively. Members, so just to be clear on what this does, it allows us to ask for reconsideration for the same day. It is what we were doing last year, even though we weren't supposed to. This kind of just puts it in our rules. The Senate does something similar where they allow for reconsiderations the same day. If we don't enact this rule, basically our standing current rules is that you would have to notice reconsideration for the following day. There are pros and cons to either approach. So happy to have that discussion, and really that's why I'm moving the rule. I'll probably vote in favor, but I do want the discussion, and so I'm happy to hear what other people have to say about it.
Would anybody like to speak against the rule? Chairman Zwanitz.
My apologies, Mr. Chairman, but could I call a Rules Committee to discuss the possibility of dividing this rule? Unless you'd like, perhaps can I divide the rule, Mr. Chairman? Let's start there.
I don't know.
I don't know either, so if we could call a Rules.
Particularly if I
Committee
don't know what's your division.
quickly. It would be delete the last two sentences of the rule. And it's not a technical correction. I do like the beginning of the rule.
Make sure I have the most current copy, Chief. I'm going to rule that that's not divisible because you're changing the original rule and it's not just changing the amendment, which if we divide an amendment, it usually, you're just messing with the amendment. So I'm going to rule that that's not divisible. Would anybody else like to speak against the rule or, okay, if not, Chief Clerk, please call the roll. House Rule 1.
Banks, Bear, Berger, Brown, Burkhart, Byron, Chadwick, Chestick, Clausen, Conrad, Prego, Davis, Eklund, Haroldson, Harshman, Harshman, I, Heiner, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrop, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stiff, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanitzer Dan, Zwanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Andrew, no to aye. Banks, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 31 aye, 30 no, 1 excused.
House Rule 1, having failed to receive a 2/3 vote majority, has failed. So now we're at that business of introduction, reading, and reference of bills, and Majority Floor Leader Nyman wants a privilege of the floor.
Thank you, everyone. I will not take much of your time. I don't want to put anybody out or anything like that, but I do want to have a brief discussion about where we're heading right now and what we're getting ready to face in the next few minutes. After yesterday, and I'm sure there's a tendency in the body to try to figure out what the next direction is going to be and the struggles that we all face and the problems that we've created and maybe not created. And as your majority floor leader, I would like to encourage everyone to realize that no matter how difficult yesterday was or understanding, not understanding, whatever, the reality of it is the folks outside of this building are having a heck of a hard time. And this one issue that we're getting ready to see first is the one that I've heard the most, and all of us know that when we go back to our districts is going to be the probably most important issue that we face as a legislature this year. So as your majority floor leader, I'm asking all of you, whatever your political, or so we say, your philosophical take on this is, I'm encouraging all of you to help support the introduction of these property tax bills. They need to get to committee. They need to have the opportunity to be able to be openly debated on the floor of this legislature, work through the committee, and see what comes out, so that we can do the business that the people of the state of Wyoming have called us here to do. They're not having an easy time out there, and they're counting on us of all the issues that we face right now, as this is probably the most pivotal. So that's why I wanted a few moments of your time, is to settle it down, think about who we're really here for, and keep it in perspective. And at the risk of offending the House, I want to see us do something where we can work with our partners down the hall to the west to actually get something through So that when we leave this house and this beautiful building that they let us live in here or work in, that we can actually take something back to our constituents that's tangible. And it's going to make a difference. In order to do that, we're going to have to work together. So I encourage you all, let's get these bills, these property tax bills to the committee so that they can work. Because that's what the real people around this chamber and at home right now are waiting on us to do. Thank you for your time.
None of that. So, Representative Larson, do you have a personal privilege?
Privilege of the floor, Mr. Speaker.
Please.
Mr. Speaker, I find it just a little bit offensive to think that now we're going to take into consideration all the hard work that committees have done over the interim, the thousands of dollars that have been spent, the time away from work, and that we would consider that these bills are now important, these committee bills are now important when the ones yesterday that were not. And I tell you, that is just a little offensive to me. We'll carry on and we'll be dignified, but I have to confess, I'm just a little bit offended.
So I think it's good we get this out a little bit. Really, we shouldn't do that on a personal privilege, but I think in order for this body to kind of heal after what happened yesterday, I think it's probably a good thing. So unless there's no other personal privileges, I'm going to take one. So the reason I let those gentlemen do that is because I want to. And I figured it was only fair, right? And, you know, I went back and looked at my opening speech. And there was one piece of it I felt I really needed to repeat. And it wasn't anything profound that I said, but it was something profound that Thomas Jefferson said in his letter to John Dickinson, 23rd of July, 1801. And after yesterday, I think these words are important. My dear friend, if we do not learn to sacrifice small differences of opinion, we can never act together. Every man cannot have his way in all things. If his own opinion prevails at some times, he should acquiesce on seeing that of others preponderate at others. Without this mutual disposition, we are disjointed individuals, but not a society. So I thought it was important for me to re-say that as we begin introductions again. And I did want to say something about the committee process. I had some numbers pulled together. This last interim, we spent $679,704 of state money to do interim work. This is the work we do all through the summer, put staff time behind. That doesn't mean that every bill that comes out is good, doesn't mean that every bill should be introduced. But the vast, vast majority of the bills, committee bills, should be introduced. Yesterday, 34% of the committee bills in the House for yesterday failed introduction. Like I said, that doesn't make them all good bills. They could have been worked. They could have come to the floor. Votes could have been made against them. And the thing that disappoints me the most, and here I'm not going to blame anybody because I don't know that for a fact. But if you were on a committee and you voted against a committee bill and didn't at least tell your chairman that you were going to vote against that committee bill, I think that violates a basic trust that we've had in this legislature for a long time. Now, if you voted against that in the interim and you went up and said, hey, you know, I'm just not going to support this bill. Or if you just went up and to your chairman and say, hey, I'm not going to support this bill, I want you to know in advance. That's the right thing to do. That's the right thing to do. And so as we move forward, I hope we keep that in mind and keep in mind the fact that those words, right? First, my dear friend. And then the second word is we have to sacrifice small differences of opinion if we want to, or we can never act together. So with that, we will start introduction. And I got to get organized. I got to get a list somewhere in here, right there. All right. Now I'm ready to rock and roll. Mr. Majority Floor Leader. No, you gotta move, see the budget session introduction. Well, I don't know. Maybe I don't have to.
I don't think you do.
I don't have to. Never mind. Never mind. I'm wrong. There is no consent list. Okay. We're at that order of business of introduction, reading and reference of bills. The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 45.
House Bill 45, sponsored by Representative Crago.
First reading of the bill.
Property tax exemption, residential structures.
Representative Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I move House Bill 45 and ask for your favorable introductory vote. Following last session, I began thinking about a way we could provide some reform to our current tax system so folks would not have to worry about continued double-digit increases in taxes each year. The people in my county have experienced that 3 years in a row. Many of the solutions require constitutional fixes and will take too long to implement. Some of the ideas are just plain too difficult to implement. Our assessors and the department can't make them happen. However, I did think of one idea that does not require a constitutional amendment. It's a tax cap structured as an exemption. House Bill 45 is a 5% tax cap exemption bill as allowed by the Wyoming Constitution. Under this bill, we would not need to amend the Constitution, and this bill could go into effect in 2024. We could have immediate relief for our folks back home. The maximum amount that residential taxes could go up each year is 5%. I have talked to our good department that handles our taxes, as well as our county assessors, and this bill can be administered by both the department and the assessors. Another benefit of the bill is we do not have to change our tax software to make it happen. No money will have to be spent to implement this bill. The cap applies to all single-family homes, not just owner-occupied, which is more broad than some of the other options put forth. I think it's important that we have something like this bill or something fairly similar go into effect this year. People of Wyoming need our help, and they need to know they're not going to have double-digit increases next year. One of the questions I've heard about the bill is the fact that land is not included in the draft. This is because after talking to our assessors and the department, if we include land, it can't happen in 2024. That's easily something we could put into effect for 2025, bring an amendment, fix the bill.
Thank you, Representative Crago. Your 2 minutes is up. Would anyone in opposition like to speak on the bill? Representative Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to state first of all that I'm actually not in opposition. This is more of a question for the good country lawyer bringer of the bill. It seems that we're giving weight to Article 15, Section 12 over Article 15, Section 11 when we talk about the constitutionality of creating a exemption rather than a cap. I just want to know if the good country lawyer is concerned about the constitutionality of this and whether it'll be challenged at a later date. Thank you.
35 seconds. We got about 25 seconds left if anybody wants to fill it. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Stivar, my apologies.
Thank you,
1
Mr.
minute.
Speaker. I'm against this bill. Look at the financial note. It says the financial impact of this form of the property tax revenue decrease is undeterminable. If we can determine what our property taxes are going up, we should be able to figure the decrease on and against.
Thank you, Representative Stivar. Representative Craigo, you've got 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in response to the good representative from Campbell County's question, yes, that's a concern. I think we should all be thinking about that, but every exemption bill that's before this legislature would have the same issue. I think the language of Section 12 allows the legislature to prescribe exemptions. That's what we're doing with this bill. And as far as the fiscal impact, we don't know yet for this year how much it's actually going to go up in every county, so we can't give you an estimate. In about a month, we'll know, and we could tell you exactly what the fiscal impact will be, but we don't know. We can't predict the future.
Thank you, Representative Craigo. Your minute is up for 30 seconds, excuse me. With debate being done, Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew? Angelos, excused. Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Prego? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 57 aye, 4 no, 1 excused.
House Bill 45, having received the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the House, House Bill 45 has passed introduction and that is referred to committee number 3, revenue. I believe, Chairman Olson, we've got a personal privilege.
Yes, privilege, Mr. Speaker, Mr.
Please.
Chairman.
Please proceed.
Thank you. It's my esteemed privilege to introduce up here in the gallery Pioneer Park fifth grade class with Miss Horn, Miss Kinsler, Miss Kessler, and Miss Murphy. Welcome to the house, the People's House.
Thank you very much for coming to the People's House. We're always really excited to have students here. The next bill for introduction is House Bill 52. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 52, sponsored by Speaker Summers.
First reading of the bill.
Property tax homestead exemption.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Speaker Summers?
Mr. Speaker, I would move House Bill 52 and ask for your favorable consideration. So ladies and gentlemen, this too is a homestead exemption. Only this provides relief to every citizen in the state that has a residential home. And so if you go on page 2, you'll notice that and it's based upon age. And so $50,000 off your assessed value, more or less. And if you're below 65, And then it goes up to 100,000 between 65 and 74. And over 75 years of age, it goes to $150,000 off. The idea is to target the older folks that are probably on more fixed income. It also has at the back a hefty price tag, which is an appropriation for local government. And I believe that it is appropriate to provide some of that money back to the people, and I believe this is a vehicle to do so.
Thank you, Speaker Summers. Would anybody in opposition like to speak or ask questions on the bill? None? Seeing none? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand. Allred. Andrew. Angelos excused. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Clouston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Swanitzer Dan. Swanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers.
It's Chestick off the floor.
I don't know.
Let's just ask him.
Representative Chestick. Aye. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 58 aye, 3 no, 1 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the House, House Bill 52 has passed introduction. That bill is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Representative Allred, do you have a privilege of the floor? All right. The next bill for our introduction is House Bill 103. Reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 103, sponsored by Representative Allred.
First reading of the bill.
Property tax assessment ratio for residential property.
You've heard the reading. What is your pleasure, Representative Allred?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 103. Ladies and gentlemen, what I did is I called LSO. I asked them to draft a bill based on the constitutional amendment that we passed last session. This is a trigger bill. If the constitutional amendment passes, which I believe it will, this bill will go into effect January 1st, 2025. And based on the limitations in that constitutional amendment, folks will receive a 1.2 discount on their property taxes. As you can look at it right there, it's going from 9.5 to 8.3. So I urge your passage of this bill. Thank you.
45 seconds, very succinct. Is there anybody who would like to speak in opposition or questions on the bill? Any member? Chairman Harshman? Seeing no further questions or debate, Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Alaman. Alred. Andrew. Angelos, excused. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Klauston. Conrad. Prego. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 60 aye, 1 no, 1 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the House, House Bill 103 has passed introduction. House Bill 103 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 112. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 112, sponsored by Representative Yin.
You've heard a reading of the bill.
Real estate transfer tax to offset property tax.
You've heard the reading. What is your pleasure, Mr. Minority Floor Leader?
Mr. Majority Whip, I move House Bill 112 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, so this is a pretty simple bill. I heard from members of the public in person, across the political spectrum, in the middle of the political spectrum. Why do we tax uncapitalized gains? Why don't we tax on the sale? That's all this bill does. It shifts some of that tax away from the uncapitalized gain of property tax and shifts that burden to the sale. And so that'll help protect those families by that reduction in property tax. And this is the only personal bill that thinks about the offset to our municipalities, our special districts, our school foundation account, and how do we backfill that to ensure that we still have those entities funded. So I do ask for your favorable consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions on this.
40 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Minority Floor Leader. Is there any questions or debate on the bill from any other member? Any member? Seeing none, Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand. Allred. Andrew. Angelos, excused. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Klauston. Conrad. Prego. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stiff. Store. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Swanser Dan. Swanser Dave. Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Stiff, aye. To no. Obermuller, aye. To no. Nyman, aye. To no. Harshman, aye. To no. Larson JT, aye. To no. Locke, aye. To no. Berger, aye. To no. Henderson, no. To aye. Swanitzer Dan, aye. To no. Allred, aye. To no. Washut, aye. I'm sorry, Washut, what is your vote? No. Washut, no. Swanser Dan, can you confirm? No. Swanser Dan is a no? My apologies. Larson Lloyd? Aye. To no. Lawley? Aye. To no. Crago? Aye. To no. Northrup? Aye. To no. Tarver? Aye. To no. Burkhart? Aye. To no. Newsom? Aye. To no. Jennings? Aye. To no. Nemec? Aye. Aye. To no. Henderson? Aye. To no. O'Hearn? Aye. To no. Davis? Aye. To no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 8 aye, 53 no, 1 excused.
Having failed to receive the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the House, House Bill 112 has failed introduction. The next bill for our Chairman's Monitor, do you have a privilege?
Yes, please, privilege. I'm
Proceed.
just a question, I guess. I was told we were supposed to be voting aye on all the tax bills, and now I'm just making sure that's still the case from here on forward or not. If anybody wants to, I'll take a privilege and help guide the body.
Chairman's Monitor, members get to vote however they choose. Thank you. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 112. The reading clerk will read the bill. Excuse me, 127. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 127, sponsored by Representative Locke.
First reading of the bill.
Property tax exemption, specified real property.
You've heard the reading. What is your pleasure, Representative Locke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move House Bill 127 and ask for your favorable consideration. I guess we've all heard, we're all really here to try to make a difference in some of these property taxes. House Bill 127 was designed with a two-pronged approach to provide tax relief and initial property tax reform. So just giving you a quick summary of the bill. It's very similar to a previous bill that basically uses the exemption approach. And basically, the qualities of this bill are these. Instead of just applying to a specific, very limited category of house, it applies to all other categories of real property. So that includes commercial and residential, but it does not include ag or personal property. It's just the real property. This gives a larger group of taxpayers relief and reform. Second, it provides reform by providing the cap. Each year, your property tax can only increase by the median household income percent or 3%, whichever is less. So all assessed value above that is exempt. This reform provides a more predictable cost model for the homeowner. And third, the bill is a clawback to 2019 for the base year for property owners who own their property on or before 2019. This gives taxpayers relief by resetting back to a 2019 tax basis, which is prior to most of the recent skyrocketing tax assessments. I ask for your vote, positive vote on this bill, which I believe provides property tax relief reform for our Wyoming families. And it provides a predictable and sustainable tax basis for taxpayers and for the counties who are beneficiaries of these taxes. Anybody in opposition to House Bill 127? Not. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Repeat. Allred. Andrew. Angelos, excused. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Clouston. Conrad. Prego. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrop. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stiff. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers.
Aye.
Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 45 aye, 16 no, 1 excused.
House Bill 127, having received a affirmative vote of 2/3 of the elected members of the House, House Bill 127 has been introduced and is assigned to Committee Number 3, Revenue. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 133.
House Bill 133, sponsored by Representative Locke.
First reading of the bill.
Property tax holiday.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move House Bill 133, property tax holiday. And I'd ask for your favorable consideration. This is a very simple bill. I originally put this together last year. The goal of this bill was basically to provide a method to get immediate relief to a wide range of property taxpayers. I weighted a little bit in favor of the all other category property taxes, basically to try to get a little bit of additional relief to the residential and commercial property tax owners. But in short, what the bill does, it just provides a property tax holiday to basically all three categories of industrial, all other, and minerals. And in short, it provides basically a 2-month tax holiday for the industrial purposes. So that's about a 16.67%. It provides a 4-month holiday to all other property. That's about a 33% relief. And finally, the monthly payments for ad valorem taxes for gross product of mineral product property taxes, it would reduce them by about that 16.67% as well. The bill was just designed to give initial relief. This was based on some numbers from earlier years where we saw a $500 million increase tax burden and we knew people were hurting. So I was looking to put some money back in, leave some money in people's pockets to make sure we stimulated the economy. And it's just a single year. So it sunsets in 1 year. And I ask for your favorable vote to move this forward so we can open the conversation.
In opposition, Representative Yin for you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So I mean, my question is, because this is probably the biggest fiscal note out of any of the bills, what do we do for that 1 year for all the districts, the counties, the towns, the sewer water districts that don't have savings for that year? Do they just not provide services or pipes start bursting and they just stay open? Tell me what happens in that situation. Thank you.
Okay, 20 seconds on that one. Representative Larson, there's plenty of time left. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd encourage a no vote on this for the same reason that was just spoke by the minority leader. Those funds, those property taxes are going to go to schools, counties and cities. And there's, and it certainly isn't the state's responsibility to backfill that. So it appears in this bill that they just have to absorb that somehow. And I don't know that I don't know how we do that. So I just exercise caution and concern.
Right, there's still a little bit of time left on the opposition side. All right. Speaker or Chairman Harshman, Speaker, Chairman Harshman.
Shocking microphone. Okay, Mr. Speaker, just a question for the bringer. And if this gets to committee number 3, if it passes and you so assign it there, would he be open to an amendment to provide some kind of backfill? And I think the issue's brought up. I mean, you call 911, you expect the fire truck to show up and put your house out. And if you don't have funding for a year, it's not going to happen. But
time.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Locke for your 30-second rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in short, the answer to that last question is yes. I would definitely am open to a conversation on that because I understand there's a potential impact here. That being said, I would love the opportunity to discuss this, move this to the Revenue Committee and discuss it. Thank you.
Time. All right, Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Excused. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Plouston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrop, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stith, Storr, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwaniter Dan, Zwaniter Dave, Speaker Summers.
Aye.
Are there any changes? Henderson, no. To aye. Berger, no. To aye. Further changes? Clouston, no. To aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 45 aye, 16 no, 1 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the elected members, House Bill 133 has been introduced and is assigned to Committee Number 3, Revenue. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 134. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 134, sponsored by Representative Lawley.
First reading of the bill.
Property Tax Deferral Program Amendments.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move introduction of House Bill 134 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, you might remember this bill from last time as 121. It's the exact same bill that we passed last session. It died in revenue over in the Senate. But this bill just amends the current property tax deferral statute. What it basically does is pull it up in the Department of Revenue because there's a requirement in the statute that each county raise it up, and smaller counties don't have the ability to do that. And that would be run out of revenue. Revenue would be the one that would then pay back to the counties whatever is deferred, and they would hold a tax lien on the property. This bill is admittedly for a select group of folks, but it helps them in all kinds of different times. Even if we fix a lot of these property tax issues, and I hope we do, even those being fixed doesn't save this group of people from the other kinds of financial stresses that can come into their lives and cause them to have to give up their home, particularly people that late in their life, they own their home outright, but their finances become such that they can't basically make it. And property taxes is one thing they will have difficulty paying, and it allows them to stay in their home. And then when that ownership is transferred into their home, the taxes are collected, and they would be collected by the state of Wyoming. So again, I ask for your favorable consideration. We've already passed this bill. It's an option, and it helps certain people in certain situations that could be important. And it's no reason not to have it in the basket of options. Thank you.
Would anybody like to speak against this bill? Not, Chief Clerk, please call the roll on House Bill 134.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos, excused. Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston, Conrad, Craig, Davis, Eklund, Harrelson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrup, Oakley, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stiff, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washit, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanitzer Dan, Zwanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers.
Aye.
Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 42 aye, 19 no, 1 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the elected members, House Bill 134 has been introduced and is assigned to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Well, we got about 3 minutes. I don't think we can do that bill in 3 minutes. Oh, we'll try. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 146. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 146, sponsored by Representative Henderson.
First reading of the bill.
Property Tax Relief Program, rental property applicants.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring House Bill 146 and move it and ask for your favorable consideration. Friends, I've been receiving many calls from folks asking, is there anything that can be done for renters relative to this important topic? And I'm asking for your help to get this into the committee so we can have the conversation. It uses the same criteria as the current refund program. All I did was suggest changing refund to relief, which I think is the main objective here, and owner to applicant. The maximum amount is $250. The current participation rate with the refund program is 9.4%, rounded off to 10%. There's about 69,000 rental homes in our state. Of that, there's a much more limited number that will qualify. I sent out to everyone, all the members, a one-page summary. What this does is it changes who may apply for the property tax relief program, makes conforming changes, provides for rulemaking and an effective date. The cost, the incremental cost, is a 1.2 million. That's for the 10% of eligible participants. It uses the same criteria as the rental program, but it adds an additional one that requires the renter to be current on their rent and any obligations related to the property. I don't know a single landlord that doesn't want their tenant to be caught up in the rent. But I think this is something that's important to our process and our conversation. I'd ask for your favorable vote. Thank you.
Anybody like to speak against this bill? Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This isn't in opposition to the bill. It's a question. What about this bill would prevent the property owners from instead just raising rent $250.
Would anybody like to speak in opposition or ask a question? Not? Representative Henderson, you have 30 seconds rebuttal.
Mr. Speaker, my apologies. I could not hear the question. I'm just going to say that when you rent a place, in fact, there's a lot of leases that require a provision for payment towards the property taxes. And so the main point here is that I think it's important to include everyone in Wyoming in this important conversation about property taxes.
It's 30 seconds.
And so it is limited, but it's rulemaking. Okay.
Time. Chief Clerk, please call the roll on House Bill 146.
Alaman. Allred. Andrew. Angelos, excused. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Clouston. Conrad. Prego. Davis. Eklund. Harrelson. Harshman. Heiner. Repeat. Repeat, Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrop. Oakley. Obermueller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. No. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stiff. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwaniter Dan. Zwaniter Dave. Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 31 aye, 30 no, 1 excused.
Having failed to receive an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the elected members, House Bill 146 has failed introduction. And so we're at that order of business at lunch, 2 p.m.
Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until 2 p.m.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Recess till 2 p.m. Committee announcements. Chairman Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources will be meeting after we get lunch at noon at E5, and we will be taking up Sutton State Archaeological Site, HB 16. Thank you.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, will meet tomorrow at 8 a.m. in room 3 to hear House Bill 14, prior authorization regulations, and House Bill 15, health insurance reimbursements of overpayments.
Chairman Northrop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 4, Education, will be meeting Wednesday, February 14th. Upon noon recess, we're going to hear starting 3 bills: House Bill 20, School Finance Regional Cost Adjustment Study, House Bill 21, Charter School Leasing, and House Bill 40, School District Trustee Oath of Office, and that'll be as time permits. Thank you.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9, Minerals Business and Economic Development, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to consider House Bill 32, Geologic Sequestration Unitization Amendments, House Bill 33, Mining Operations Blasting Requirements, and if time permits, House Bill 34, Solid Waste Municipal Cease and Transfer Funding.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, will meet in about 15 minutes to hear 2 bills. House Bill 8, Commercial Driver's License Hazardous Materials Endorsement, and House Bill 9, Fuel Tax Licensee Information Deadline.
All right, now we stand at recess.